Well, good afternoon, and thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Sam Cook. I'm the Director of Policy and Planning here at PCCD. This afternoon, we're going to be discussing the Collaborative Community Violence Intervention, or CCVI, Strategies Grant Funding Opportunity. This funding opportunity is one of 3 competitive solicitations supported with state violence intervention and prevention funding that are currently open and accepting applications. PCCD is hosting a series of informational webinars for interested applicants for each of these funding opportunities, including today's session. If you're interested in learning more about the other open solicitations and grant opportunities, we encourage you to check out recordings of webinars that we hosted earlier in the week on the VIP grant solicitation and the new Building Opportunity Through Out-of-School Time Grants program solicitation. You can also find funding announcements and other information that's available on the Gun Violence Grants and Funding webpage on PCCD's website about all of these funding opportunities. During our time today, we hope to address any questions that you might have about the CCVI Strategies grants solicitation specifically, as well as the application process, which utilizes PCCD's e-grant system. I'm really pleased to be joined by my co-presenter and partner in crime, Zoe Miner, who's the manager of the Violence Intervention and Prevention Program here at PCCD, as well as other team members who are supporting today's event. As a reminder, the grant opportunity for CCVI closes in just under a month on October 31st, 2024. Happy Halloween. And there are many, many opportunities to reach out and seek support and assistance from PCCD and our technical assistance partners before then, which we'll be covering in our presentation. Couple of quick housekeeping notes before we dive in. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on PCCD's website and YouTube channel as soon as it's available. If you have any questions regarding the presentation or funding announcement, you can enter them in the Q&A box throughout the session, and our team will be monitoring those as they come in. We will be addressing some frequently asked questions at the end of the presentation, and we'll post responses to questions we received today in our public-facing Q&A document. Just a note that we can't hear you on this platform and you can't unmute yourself to speak up. So the Q&A box is how to submit any questions or comments or anything else that you might have to say or share with us. So today we'll start with a brief overview of PCCD, then dive into more specifics about the CCVI Strategies Grant Program, the funding announcement, and the application process. Apologies, my screen is doing things on its own. It's apparently haunted. So our eGrants application system is where this funding announcement lives. So we will be also doing a bit of a dive into that process as well for folks who might be newer to that system. We'll also be providing resources on how to ask questions and seek additional support regarding the funding opportunity, answer some frequently asked questions that we've already heard from potential applicants so far, and then again, open it up to questions from you all at the end if we have time. So let's start with a quick overview of PCCD. The Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, or PCCD, was established in 1978 through state law, and we serve as the Commonwealth's Justice Policy Making Agency. Our mission is to enhance the quality, coordination, and planning within the criminal and juvenile justice systems to facilitate the delivery of services to victims of crime and to increase the safety of our communities. We are a relatively small state agency housed within the executive office with approximately 150 employees working across 4 different offices. We are directed by an overarching commission board, which is 7 different advisory committees, the School Safety and Security Committee, as well as 2 training boards. PCCD's responsibilities and programs fall into a number of different areas, including funding and grants, technical assistance, data and research, victims compensation and services, training, and other responsibilities. If you are interested in learning more about these responsibilities and areas, I'd encourage you to check out our website at pccd.pa.gov. So one of the biggest areas of responsibilities that PCCD has is in the area of funding and grant making. So this slide shows a snapshot of some of the ways that PCCD's grant funds have been used and things they've supported in recent years, again, with that overarching goal of addressing both emerging as well as longer standing public safety challenges. Those grants address programs related to gun violence prevention. Obviously, that's central to the program we're talking about today, as well as areas like victim services, school safety and mental health, criminal and juvenile justice improvements, youth prevention, data and research, children's advocacy centers, and law enforcement technology and training, among many others. If you haven't already done so, we absolutely encourage you to sign up to receive grant notifications from PCCD by visiting our website. Once you sign up for those, anything we release will go straight to your inbox so you can check them out. So let's move on to today's main topic, which is violence intervention and prevention funding that supports the CCVI strategies grant solicitation that you're all here to learn more about. So the VIP grant program was established in 2021, and we've had 3 cohorts of funding announcements and grantees awarded to date. Those have supported more than 240 local projects and initiatives all across the Commonwealth. These projects have ranged from smaller, more grassroots programs at the neighborhood level, all the way up to larger scale initiatives and partnerships reaching across entire communities, counties, and regions. If you are interested in exploring the projects that PCCD has approved to date through the VIP grants program and through the CCVI strategies program, we definitely encourage you to check out our gun violence grants and funding webpage, which includes archived project summaries as well as a link to an interactive gun violence grants and data dashboard. In addition to showing the types of programming that VIP has supported in the past, as well as where projects are located, you can also use newly added data filters to see county level homicide data, as well as zip code level non-fatal firearm injury rates through 2023. So it's a really great tool, especially as you're thinking about kind of showcasing how your community looks compared to others in terms of some of those trends. So looking specifically at collaborative community violence intervention, or CCVI. So the concept of CCVI grants really began in 2022 during our second year of VIP funding. So in that year, 2022-2023, PCCD funded an initial cohort of 5 CCVI pilot sites that were focused on supporting more comprehensive collaborative anti-violence strategies taking place within focused geographic areas. So those areas included 1 site in Allegheny County, 1 in York County, 1 in Delaware County, and 2 sites in Philadelphia. In 2023, PCCD's School Safety and Security Committee, which is responsible for overseeing VIP funding, approved another CCVI strategies project in Lehigh County, bringing the CCVI initiative's reach to 6 sites across 5 Pennsylvania counties. If you want to learn more about these projects, again, encourage you to check out our gun violence grants and funding webpage for more details. So the VIP grant program and by affiliation, the CCVI strategies program is one of several initiatives supported by the Shapiro-Davis administration as part of its commitment to improving public safety and addressing issues like gun violence. This quote from Governor Shapiro, I think, does a really good job echoing that commitment and demonstrating it. Just a note, too, that as PCCD's chair and chair of the School Safety and Security Committee, Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis has also been a strong champion and advocate for gun violence prevention, really making it and cementing it as a top priority, both for our agency and for the administration as a whole. So mentioned before that the CCVI grants funding announcement is one of 3 solicitations that has been announced by PCCD utilizing VIP funds. So since applicants can only come in under 1 solicitation, just wanted to talk through some of the high-level differences between these grant programs. And as ever, encourage interested applicants to, of course, carefully review each of these written funding announcements to make the determination as to which competitive funding opportunity might be the right fit for your specific organization and the programming that you would like to see PCCD grant funds support. So let's start first with VIP grants. So this solicitation is really intervention and response focused with programs addressing violence that's already occurring within communities, with an emphasis on reaching elevated risk places and people who are most likely to experience community violence. And for purposes of VIP funds, we define community violence to include domestic violence in addition to gun and group-related violence that's been used in prior solicitations definitions. And the solicitation also cites some new data sources that we mentioned earlier, like those non-fatal firearm injuries. VIP grant funds support targeted programming services and strategies designed to address community violence, with a priority for programs in areas with high rates of gun violence and other violent crime in the Commonwealth. Just a note that this solicitation is arguably more suitable for standalone programs that are run by an organization and its partners. And just wanted to note as well, and again, encourage you to check out the webinar if you're curious on this solicitation, but there are a couple of changes to the VIP solicitation that we go over in that webinar. So that includes updating the list of recommended eligible models and approaches, to include things like violence reduction councils, as well as domestic violence related programming. And we've also created some new application tracks to differentiate between newer versus more established programs and organizations. So that's solicitation 1. Solicitation 2, by contrast, the Boost Grants program is more prevention focused through its emphasis on reaching at-risk school-age youth in or underserved communities. So Boost funds can be used for a wide range of programming and models that go beyond what you might think of as the traditional anti-violence strategies that have been supported with VIP funds. Boost grants can support more universal prevention and youth engagement strategies, including activities like mentoring, career readiness, social emotional learning, and more. So while some of the populations and service areas may overlap with VIP grants, and to a certain extent even perhaps CCVI, Boost is unique in its focus on, first, explicitly serving at-risk K-12 school-age populations, and secondly, doing so through out-of-school time programming specifically. So as with VIP grants, Boost grants really are designed for standalone programs that are run by an organization or its partners. So last but not least, our third solicitation, the one you're all here to learn about today, is the Collaborative CVI Strategies Solicitation, or CCVI. And we really think that CCVI is, to use a sports analogy, a different ballgame entirely from VIP and Boost grants. So why do we say that? It's because it's designed to support more comprehensive, systems-focused community violence intervention strategies that really span across an entire community, really with the purpose of enhancing local coordination to address gun and group violence that is occurring. So CCVI funding can support local planning, as well as implementation of focused, intensive, and scaled violence prevention and intervention strategies that are responsive to known gaps in services and resources within a given community. As with VIP grants, CCVI grants target elevated risk places and populations, and unlike the other solicitations that we've just covered, CCVI really is best suited for high capacity organizations and agencies serving as the lead applicant, designed for projects involving multiple system partners and organizations working together in the same geographic area. So I know that's a lot, certainly encourage you to dig in more in each funding announcement, but just want to reiterate, please use your best judgment when determining if a funding solicitation is right for your organization. You should trust your gut while you're reading each solicitation. I would encourage you to please don't try to stretch or bend your organization's programming mission or core services in any way, or your capabilities to try to fit a particular funding announcement. It never ends up usually working out well if you try to do that kind of maneuvering. So if the scope of activities or the purpose areas feel like they're a good fit, if they're resonating with you as you're reading a particular solicitation, they feel like they're just a perfect match for your organization's capacity, your mission, your goals, experience, and expertise, trust your gut. That's probably the one to go with. Alternatively, if you're reading through aspects of a particular funding announcement and it makes you nervous, or if you're not clear about how your organization would accomplish a required deliverable, it's likely a sign that the solicitation isn't a great fit for your organization for where you are right now. So let's zoom out a little bit and talk about this year's VIP grant solicitations and funding availability. So this year's state budget included a total of $56.5 million in state funds to PCCD for its VIP line item appropriation. $11.5 million of those VIP funds were carved out through fiscal code language to support the new Building Opportunity through Out of School Time grant program. And that leaves $45 million in funds available to support VIP grants and CCVI grants this year. So as with prior year solicitations, many of the funding parameters of VIP funds come from state law, the Pennsylvania School Code specifically, and that includes eligible applicants as well as eligible activities. The School Safety and Security Committee adopted a fiscal year 2024-2025 VIP grants funding framework earlier this year to utilize this available funding to support two separate funding solicitations. The first is the VIP grant funding opportunity, and the second is the CCVI grant funding opportunity. Today's webinar is going to focus on that second solicitation, CCVI. So let's talk about that solicitation just a little bit further. So let's define CVI. So as the name suggests, a big focus of the CCVI strategy solicitation is to support community violence intervention, or CVI strategies and approaches. The U.S. Department of Justice's CVI guiding principles, which were released a couple of years ago, and is a really great tool in our estimation. Those principles focus on reducing violence through community-centered approaches. CVI strategies are, at their core, community-centered. They involve local stakeholders and residents in decision-making to address specific community needs. They are equitable and inclusive by ensuring fair access to resources and support, including prioritizing marginalized communities who are disproportionately affected by violence. CVI is also evidence-informed, using data and proven strategies to guide interventions, focusing on what works. And they are also designed to be effective and sustainable. So that occurs by implementing long-term adaptable solutions that address root causes of violence and can have lasting impacts on community safety. So let's talk about the other C in CCVI, which stands for collaborative. So a collaborative approach for purposes of this funding announcement involves partners establishing and consistently adhering to shared commitments and principles with a goal of effective service delivery. So this includes regularly convening to assess progress, identify barriers and gaps, develop or enhance referral systems, and evaluate service quality on an ongoing basis. The collaboration also aims to improve coordination, increase efficiency, enhance access to services, and ensure high quality support, especially for victims of gun violence. It fosters better linkages among services that are in place in the community, and it identifies opportunities for greater effectiveness in addressing both individual and community needs. So eligible applicants can seek CCVI grant funding this year through one of two tracks. And this is new, so if you've considered CCVI before, just take note that this is a little bit different this year than prior iterations. So the first track is the CCVI Planning Grants track, which aims to fund local jurisdictions to develop comprehensive violence reduction plans that are informed by a violence reduction council or similar group. The second track, CCVI Implementation Grants, focuses on advancing collaborative, community-driven strategies to reduce violence in areas with high level of gun incidents, especially where homicides increased between 2022 and 2023 using proven CVI methods. As noted on this slide, applicants can only submit one application under this funding announcement, so you can't come in under both tracks. And just a friendly reminder, if your organization isn't eligible to make direct application under CCVI, you can still be included as a proposed subrecipient in an eligible applicant's funding request. So let's talk about some other things to consider from the CCVI angle. So as we noted previously, the CCVI strategy solicitation is unique from other VIP funded programs in a number of ways. And this includes several grant related requirements that we wanted to make sure folks were mindful of as they considered this opportunity. So the first is one I've already mentioned, which is Violence Reduction Councils, or VRCs. So planning and implementation efforts funded by CCVI must be supported by violence reduction councils or similar groups. These councils take a public health focused interdisciplinary approach involving public health, criminal justice, social services, and community organizations. They work together through this council to analyze homicide and assault data, identify long-term solutions for preventing violence, and really keep a finger to the pulse of what is driving violence or helping to mitigate violence in a specific community. So for more information on this model, definitely encourage you to check out the Violence Reduction Council Toolkit, which was recently published from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And also wanted to just make a quick plug that if you're interested in the Violence Reduction Council model and learning more, you can join us tomorrow, Friday, October 11th at 1 p.m. for a webinar hosted in partnership with Johns Hopkins Center for Gun Violence Solutions, where we'll be discussing that toolkit and some of their research and resources that's designed to help local communities establish violence reduction councils for gun violence prevention. If you're interested in that webinar session, you can register to participate on our website. And please know that recordings will also be available if you can't attend live. So now that we've covered that first requirement, the violence reduction councils, let's move to the second one, which is local violence reduction plans. So a violence reduction plan informed by a violence reduction council or similar group must be completed before applying for an implementation grant, or that plan needs to be developed with grant funds if you're applying for a planning grant. And then the last requirement we wanted to highlight for you was around funding match requirements. So for the CCVI implementation track, all of those implementation projects are going to require matching funds, 10% in year 2 and 25% in year 3 of the grant. And those matching funds can be cash, in kind, or a combination of both. A note that there is not a funding match requirement for track 1 planning grant projects. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about sort of the solicitation at large. Let's talk a little bit about the specific application tracks and compare and contrast that a little bit further. So let's start with track 1, which are our planning grants. So under this track, you can ask for funding that can cover costs related to things like strategic planning, that can include staff, consultants, data collection, research, travel and training, and more. Organizations that form a violence reduction council and successfully develop a local violence reduction plan through this kind of grant from CCVI will be prioritized for future VIP funding to then implement solutions based on identified gaps and needs that were established through that planning process. So that's sort of the benefit of going through the planning track, especially if you don't have a plan like that already in place. The second track is focused on implementation. So this track funds projects that are addressing local drivers of violence based on an already completed local violence reduction plan developed with a violence reduction council or similar multidisciplinary group. The project must align with that plan and be overseen by the violence reduction council that's in place or a similar entity. Again, we've mentioned that a funding match is required for implementation grant applications. So that would be 10% in year 2, 25% in year 3. And just a note that PCCD expects to fund somewhere between 2 to 3 projects under this implementation track. So those not meeting the criteria for the CCVI implementation track are strongly encouraged to consider applying for a CCVI planning grant or under the VIP grant solicitation as appropriate. So just something to think about, that under both tracks, priority will be given to projects in zip codes with high firearm-related injury rates or counties with increased homicides between 2022 and 2023. And again, we have some data tools that are available on our website as well as in the solicitation itself that may be helpful for framing how your county or community fits into that overall landscape. So let's talk about timelines a little bit. We wanted to touch on a couple important dates for your awareness. So the first is October 30th. That is the final day that you can submit questions to PCCD related to this funding announcement, because the very next day, October 31st, is the deadline for submitting your application in eGrants. So again, for CCVI this year, you are going to be doing your full application within our eGrant system. So that's something that you want to make sure that you get set up with, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later in the presentation. So after all the applications are submitted and reviewed and scored and all those good things, somewhere in January 2025, likely mid-January, applications are going to be presented to the School Safety and Security Committee for approval. So after that committee meeting and into February, we'll be working with successful applicants who were recommended for an award, just to finalize things and make sure everything's set up for that March 1, 2025 start date for the project period. So as mentioned before, $45 million total in VIP state funds is available this year for both the VIP grants and CCVI grants solicitations. So depending on the track that you're applying under for CCVI, there are some differences in the expected number of awards, the maximum grant amount you can request, as well as the project period, how long essentially you have to complete your grant project. So starting with track 1, or the planning grants, under this track, the anticipated number of awards is going to range likely from 5 to 10 awards, with the maximum award amount up to $75,000 for an up to 18-month project period. So a little bit smaller of an amount for those planning grants and a little bit shorter of a time period involved there. For track 2, our implementation grants, as we mentioned before, the anticipated number of awards will range likely from 2 to 3 in that category, with the maximum award amount up to $2 million and the project period up to 36 months or 3 years. So note that the same grant amount limit criteria is going to apply across both of these tracks, namely that applicants can't request more than 50% of their total actual operating expenditures, or the maximum allowable amount under each CCVI track, whichever is less. And that is a criteria that's consistent across all VIP funded solicitations, CCVI and Boost. We'll go over that sort of criteria a little bit more in just a few moments. So per state law, VIP funding is limited to the following entities that can submit an application in our eGrant system: community-based nonprofit organizations with active 501c3 status, institutions of higher education, municipalities, counties, and district attorneys' offices. Just a little caveat on district attorneys' offices, however. Counties are going to need to submit an application in eGrants on behalf of DA's offices who are interested in applying under the solicitation in our eGrant system. So just wanted to call attention to that for folks who might be in that category. So let's talk a little bit about indirect costs. Because this year's CCVI solicitation is 100% state funded, federally approved indirect rates do not apply under the solicitation. We call attention to this because in the past, CCVI has included a mix of federal funds. So just want to make sure folks are aware that this year, indirect costs are limited to 10% of what is called modified total direct costs, or MTDC. So if you're wondering, well, how do you calculate MTDC? That'll only include expenses that are shown under the first column on this slide. So things like salaries and wages, fringe benefits, materials and supplies, services, travel, and up to $25,000 for each subaward. They do not include costs that are in the second column: equipment, capital expenditures, rent, tuition remission, or subaward portions exceeding $25,000. It is important to note that administrative costs need to be clearly justified as direct project costs, or they will be considered as indirect and count against that maximum 10% rate. So now that I have covered all of that and done all those numbers, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Zoe Miner, who's going to walk you all through the application process. Zoe?
Great, Sam, thanks. So let's dive into how to complete the application process for the CCVI funding opportunity. I know we've mentioned this a few times, but of the 3 open solicitations that Sam mentioned, CCVI is the only one utilizing our e-grant system at this time. So having said that, and as we will discuss in greater detail, the CCVI grants application involves multiple steps. So you'll create, work on, and submit your application in our e-grant system with review and scoring to take place after that. Then recommended applications will go to the School Safety and Security Committee for approval, then ultimately project implementation. So what are the actual steps to applying? So first, you'll want to download and review the CCVI funding announcement. You will want this close by as you work on the various sections of your application. Next, you'll want to compile all the required attachments as outlined in the funding announcement. Once you complete working on all the sections of e-grants and added all your attachments, you'll want to make sure to hit that submit button. And I'll cover how to navigate our e-grant system a little bit more next. So approved grantees will be contacted by PCCD staff to address any program or fiscal concerns to finalize the award process. And just a friendly reminder that the due date to submit your application and all the required attachments is Thursday, October 31st, 2024. So really driving this home for everybody, the CCVI funding opportunity is utilizing our e-grant system. There is a grant application walkthrough guide to help you get started with this process, and I'll walk through how to get started in e-grants next. So there are 3 main steps to focus on to get started in our e-grant system. First, you'll want to create your own user account. Second, you'll want to register your agency. Then you'll want to make sure that you're set up with all the proper roles. So let's dive into each of these steps in a little bit more detail. So first, you'll want to head to that Getting Started in eGrants webpage, like you see on your screen. This is where all the eGrants resources can be found. So you'll click that eGrants button, and then once you head to that page, you'll want to click on that first link. That first link says log into eGrants to create an account. Then a screen shown on the bottom right side of your screen will appear. Once you get to that login page, you will click Not Registered, register as a new Keystone login user to create your account. And just a friendly reminder that there are help guides available on the main eGrants page. To complete your user account, you will just continue following the prompts after you selected that Not Registered, register as a new Keystone login user. Then you'll want to register your agency utilizing the eGrants agency registration form. This form, once complete, will need to get emailed to the resource account that you see on your screen. That email account is also listed in the form. So you'll also notice on the form that it asks for your agency's user manager. Every agency must have an agency user manager. This role is very important because it approves role requests and maintains existing security for users already established. There is a specific user manager help guide that will be helpful in learning how to approve roles. So when users are requesting roles, these are the options that will appear. There's an eGrants role request walkthrough guide also available on the eGrants landing page to guide you through how to request these roles. Please note when users will need the submission role to actually hit the submit button to submit that application in eGrants when you're ready for that step. And a friendly reminder for folks that we share all the time, which is important for your eGrants application, is that you want to make sure that each agency has at least to users associated with your account. So now that you're all set up in eGrants, I wanted to show how you can find the funding announcement in the system. You can click the Funding Announcement tab at the top, and it should show you all the current open funding announcements available in eGrants at this time. Please note that PCCD also uses SurveyMonkey for initial funding requests, which is what Boost and VIP are using at this time. So on this screen, you will see that the 2024 Collaborative CVI Strategies Grants is the first one to appear. You can also navigate to this page by clicking the second click here on the welcome screen once you log into eGrants, and that click here says, click here to create a new application in response to FA, or you can just click that FA tab like I just went over. So once you click on the actual funding announcement, it takes you to the summary screen. First, please download that FA. It can be found at that blue here hyperlink that you see on your screen. Then your agency should appear to create a new application. You will be assigned a grant ID when you hit that Create New Application button. Please keep this handy as you continue to complete your application. Once you log in and out of eGrants, you will be able to find the application that you started with that grant ID. So after you click to create your application, you will see various sections that will be scored as part of your application. In addition, PCCD has other standard sections that must be completed as well. All the sections are explained in the written funding announcement. Once you are finished with each section, please make sure to mark it complete and hit save. You will not be able to submit your application until all sections are marked complete. The completion status can be found in the upper right-hand corner of the section page, with the Save button to be found at the bottom of the page. Additionally, please note that eGrants times out after 20 minutes, so please be sure to save your work frequently. We also recommend at times, depending on your preferred method of working, that it might be helpful to prepare some sections outside of eGrants before going into submit, whatever your preference is. But if you are doing all of the work in the eGrant system, please be mindful of the clock that's in the upper right-hand corner and to save frequently. So I must note that we recently updated our eGrant system to include an e-signature process that allows for your organization's authorized users to electronically sign your application. This is in place of the ink and paper process that we used previously and should help cut down on having to track down and mail a separate signature page document. To electronically sign the application, at least one person from your agency must have the e-signature role in eGrants. Please use the links in the PowerPoint to access instructions which explain how to request the e-signature role. These guides can also be found on an eGrants page on PCCD's website. Please note that the e-signature does not need to be completed by the time you submit your application. You can complete this process after the application period closes, but you will eventually need to complete this process prior to receiving your award. As ever, if you should need any assistance in this process, we recommend contacting the eGrants help desk. So for any technical assistance with setting up your eGrants account, please contact the eGrants help desk like I just previously mentioned. They are the team that can ensure that you're set up and registered properly and that you have all the necessary roles. As I have mentioned several times throughout this presentation, there are also a number of guides to reference to help you through this process as well. So differently, if you have questions as your organization is pulling together your application, non-eGrants related questions, we encourage you to check out the resources available through the PAPs Alliance. This technical assistance initiative provides free training and technical assistance to organizations working to prevent and reduce community violence. You can check out the online resource library, which features research, tools, checklists, podcast videos, and other violence prevention and intervention resources on demand. In addition, groups can request technical assistance on a variety of topics, including how to navigate the application process. For more information, please visit www.papeacealliance.org. And while you're there, consider signing up for WestEd's virtual office hours for VIP and CCVI applicants. This will take place on Wednesday, October 16th from 2 to 4. During this time, you can chat with subject matter experts at WestEd and their partners and can ask questions related to your proposal and the application process. This is a great resource, especially if you are wrestling with which track or solicitation to apply under or having trouble with certain parts of the application process. So before we dive into some frequently asked questions, I wanted to provide a quick overview of how you can reach out to PCCD if you still need assistance and don't see your questions answered anywhere. So as previously mentioned, today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website when it's available. So please feel free to refer back to this information if needed. You can also email PCCD staff at any time at the email ra-cd-vipgrants@pa.gov. Any new questions coming into this account will be answered and then also posted on our online Q&A webpage, which is also linked here. We encourage you to check out the Q&A before reaching out because your question may have already been answered.
Great, thanks so much, Zoe. So now we're going to get to the frequently asked questions component. So these are questions we've already received and answered in our Q&A doc online, specific to the CCVI solicitation. So let's dive into them. So the first is, am I able to apply for CCVI, VIP, and Boost? So the answer is that, as stated in the funding announcements, eligible applicants for the CCVI solicitation who are also eligible under Boost and/or VIP are only allowed to submit one application to PCCD. So you can't submit an application under all three of these funding announcements if you're eligible to do so. So again, really encourage you, take a look at the solicitations. We have one-pagers that are specific to applicant types that are on our gun violence grants and funding webpage that might help you think about that and see quickly what you're eligible for. So after you go through all that, just really encourage you to select the solicitation that best aligns with your proposed project. Another question that we've gotten is, what is a Violence Reduction Council, and can I use my county's Criminal Justice Advisory Board, or CJAB? So we've already discussed this a little bit, but just as a refresher, Violence Reduction Councils are a public health-focused interdisciplinary approach to preventing community violence that brings together public health, criminal justice, social services, and community-based organizations to collaboratively view data such as homicides and assaults to identify and implement long-term solutions. You can use a similar entity, such as a Criminal Justice Advisory Board, to fulfill these requirements, so long as you are attentive to include all of the necessary perspectives and individuals who comprise violence reduction councils in that approach. So this may be a little different than how your county Criminal Justice Advisory Board is currently comprised. So again, encourage you to check out the Violence Reduction Council Toolkit on Johns Hopkins website for some additional information about this approach. And again, you can also sign up for that webinar that's going to take place tomorrow that'll cover this topic in greater detail with our friends at Johns Hopkins. So another question that we've received is, a district attorney's office eligible to apply separately from their county? So the answer here is that district attorneys may apply. They're an eligible applicant for VIP funds. But as we noted before, the county needs to act as the fiduciary agent and be the official applicant and direct recipient of funding if awarded. And that's because Pennsylvania statute requires all payments to any agency under the jurisdiction of a county be made payable to the county on behalf of that agency. So nothing would preclude a district attorney's office or county or municipality from submitting separate and distinct applications under the CCVI solicitation if that was something you wanted to do. However, given the competitive nature of the solicitation and the emphasis on supporting comprehensive strategies for an entire local jurisdiction or community, we would strongly encourage CCVI applicants to consider collaborative proposals and projects, and at a minimum, ensure that any submitted applications are not duplicative. Another question we've gotten is around police departments and regional police departments specifically. Are they eligible to apply? And so the answer to that is no, they can't apply directly. And so just a friendly reminder that any entity that's not eligible to apply directly, that doesn't mean that you could not be written in as a proposed subrecipient or partner within an eligible applicant's proposal. So we've gotten some questions around match requirements. Do I need to have a match? And so as we covered earlier, there is a match requirement for Track 2 implementation projects only through this year's CCVI solicitation. So if you are coming in for CCVI implementation grants, you are going to need to have at least a 10% match in year 2 and a 25% match in year 3. And again, you can use cash, in kind, or some combination of both to fulfill that match requirement. We do encourage you to check out the written funding announcement for some more detailed information on this requirement, as well as some examples of match sources and some other considerations. We've gotten some questions also on whether or not PCCD is looking for quantitative metrics and data, financial reports, success stories, or other specific documentation. The answer to that is yes, those are all great things to reference and include within your proposal. Again, what we're really looking for in CCVI is that coordinated, comprehensive approach. So make sure you're paying attention to the requirements and the prompts in both the written funding announcement and the eGrants application, and pull together whatever information and local data that you think is most compelling to tell that story and address those requirements. And then finally, a question around, can we apply if we are currently receiving funds from another PCCD grant? So the answer to that is yes, with a little bit of a caveat in the sense of if you have received funding before, we're going to ask you to be upfront about that and also describe the impact of that funding to date, just so we can have a clear understanding of how your proposed new grant activities are going to complement, align, and not sort of duplicate either what's currently being funded in a jurisdiction, and just to sort of differentiate that a little bit. So those are the questions we've gotten to date. I am looking at our Q&A feature here, and I do not see any additional submitted questions that don't kind of overlap with FAQs that we've already received. So with that, I'm going to wrap up today's event just by thanking everyone for taking time out of their day to join us for today's session. We hope you found it to be informative. A reminder, it's being recorded, so you can watch this and view this. We'll send out a link as soon as it's available. And just appreciate your interest in this funding opportunity, and looking forward to reviewing the applications that are submitted under this year's CCVI program. Thanks so much and have a great rest of your day.